By the way, welcome to the world of cable where they try and silence your voice. Aren't you happy?
Sean, I've been trying to silence you for years. It never works. I mean, you're like my big brother. I've been like, stop, Hannity.
Oh, yeah, my big older brother. Yeah, go ahead, slap him around. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. It's just so no one has a chance against you. I'm not concerned at all. Sean, thanks so much.
Have a great show. Good to see you.
All right. And good evening from Washington. I'm Laura Ingraham. Thanks for joining us. This is the Ingraham Angle. Let's get right to our top story. Breaking news out of the Department of Justice about a possible special counsel investigation targeting Hillary Clinton. In a letter obtained by Fox News, we've learned that Attorney General Jeff Sessions is directing prosecutors to take a closer look at the 2010 sale of Uranium One to a Russian-backed company and the Clinton Foundation's alleged unlawful involvement in it. Clinton's alleged donations to the Clinton Foundation amounted to a quid pro quo for Hillary's State Department to sign off on the transaction, which gave Russia control of about 20% of America's uranium capacity. And according to a letter from DOJ to the House Judiciary Committee, the Attorney General is open now to the possibility of appointing a special counsel to look into the matter and other matters related to the Clintons. And news comes ahead of Mr. Sessions' highly anticipated testimony tomorrow before the House Judiciary Committee. Joining us now exclusively for a reaction are two House Republicans who want a special counsel to investigate Mrs. Clinton, Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio and Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. You guys wrote an op-ed, and you asked Jeff Sessions to move forward on a special counsel. Congressman Jordan?
Yeah. Well, no.
Are they listening?
Yeah, well, they're definitely listening. You talked about the headline tonight in the Washington Post. Sessions considers appointing his second special counsel. We sent a letter on July 27th outlining why we think it's warranted. We met with Attorney General Sessions and Justice Department staff on September 28th. So far, we've got nothing, but it's amazing. Today, we do an op-ed, and suddenly the Department of Justice has had a come-to-Jesus moment, and now there's going to be a special counsel, or at least they're talking about a special counsel. That's exactly what has to happen when you think about how the things we've learned and how serious they are. The American people want answers. We want to give them those answers. We think a special counsel is the way to go.
Now, Congressman Gaetz, let's go through the many issues, the myriad issues. We have the Clinton Foundation. We have Uranium One. We have the way Comey handled a potential indictment, announcing the investigation, then announcing there would be no indictment. His process for going about this investigation, not being present at important interviews, immunity deals struck with people like Cheryl Mills. Yep. What among those many things, and again, our viewers, heads are swirling, what are the most concerning elements of those, given what you both know already about this?
So many of these scandals link back to the Clinton Foundation, and it highlights that the American people are tired of this double standard where there's one set of rules for the Clintons and another set of rules for everyone else. Now, we're 6 months into this investigation of President Trump and his team in Russia. They found nothing. But look at the treasure trove of information that continues to be found out about the Clinton Foundation functioning essentially as a money laundering operation for the Uranium One deal. And that really ought to concern us. Our uranium assets are precious. We're an importer of uranium. It's crazy to give Russia this access to our uranium assets, but you had the very people that are now investigating President Trump involved in approving this deal and then silencing the witness who was ready to tell us that bribes and kickbacks were contributing to undermining America's interests. It's crazy. We need a special counsel to go after the Clinton Foundation. And Robert Mueller and Rod Rosenstein are way too conflicted to proceed against the president.
Now, Rosenstein would have to call for the special counsel, correct? Is that right?
I'm not sure of that. We don't know the answer to that, but when we sent our letter, we sent it to both Attorney General Sessions and to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. So we'll see what we do.
This goes back to Sessions recusing himself from anything related to
we don't know how far that goes. What we do know is stuff you brought up, Laura. James Comey called the Clinton investigation a matter, not an investigation. James Comey began drafting an exoneration letter prior to interviewing Secretary Clinton before the investigation was over. When he ultimately gets fired, which he should have been a long time ago, but when he's fired, what does he do? Leaks a government document through a friend to the New York Times. And what was his goal? He told us under oath to create momentum for a special counsel. And who does that special counsel have to be? his best friend, his predecessor, his mentor, Bob Mueller, who was the guy who was conflicted in this whole Uranium One deal. So when all those facts come out, not to mention the dossier, when all this comes out, we're saying, if this doesn't warrant a special counsel, what the heck does? That's all we said. And finally, today, they finally decide, oh, there's an op-ed today. Maybe we better answer Congress, who 3.5 months ago sent us a letter demanding it clear back then.
Congressman Gates, what do you think did take so long here? I think a lot of us who are, big fans of Jeff Sessions, and I'm one of them, I just find this to be curious. It's almost like anything that touches Russia, everyone's afraid of touching. Because you think, oh, you're trying to cover up for, some phantom collusion. You're trying to skid the tracks for Trump. This does go to national security, the integrity of the justice system, the credibility of Jim Comey and how he handled this investigation from the beginning. When I heard that he wasn't present, unless something's changed, he was not present when Hillary Clinton was interviewed. How can he not be present? How do they have no notes of that? No transcript of her testimony?
Well, it's
It happened on a Saturday, I believe, on 4th of July weekend, if my memory serves me correct.
Well, it's absolutely ludicrous that James Comey made the decision to start drafting an exoneration letter before interviewing witnesses and before interviewing Hillary Clinton herself. Your question is, why did it take so long? And why tonight do we have, on the eve of Jeff Sessions' testimony before the Judiciary Committee, a statement that they're open to a special counsel rather than what Jim and I would like, which is the appointment of a special counsel? It all goes back to the Clinton Foundation. Jeff Sessions, in his testimony to the Senate, said he was recused on any matter that had any nexus to the Clinton Foundation. There was no legal obligation for Jeff Sessions to say that or do that, but he did. There is no way to investigate the Uranium One deal without looking into the Clinton Foundation filling out deposit slips with millions of dollars of donations from the Russians. So that appears to be the challenge, the nexus. And we certainly cannot leave to Mr. Rosenstein the question of appointing the special counsel, because it's Rosenstein's name on the signature block, sealing from Congress and the American people the very testimony of the informant ready to tell us about the bribes and the kickbacks.
What do you make of the old Obama intel chiefs coming out yesterday and, in various ways, various interviews recently, they're coming out and criticizing Trump on his comments about Putin and so forth, given the fact that we know both of them have their own credibility problems in testifying before Congress.
Of course. Well, I also think it's interesting. Go back to the January 6, 2017 meeting that Mr. Comey had with President-elect Trump, where he briefs President-elect Trump on the dossier. And shortly thereafter, someone leaks the fact that that meeting took place and that the contents of that meeting or the discussion of that meeting was about the dossier. Someone leaks that to CNN. Who leaked that? Who leaked that to CNN? And did that become the thing that legitimized the dossier so much that the press could then print it, which CNN did, and BuzzFeed could print the entire dossier itself? So those are the kind of questions. We haven't even gotten really to the dossier, but if a Clinton-financed, Democrat National Committee-financed Oppo research was turned into an intelligence document, and if that was the basis that for the FISA court giving a warrant to spy on Americans associated with the Trump campaign, if all that happened, if our government colluded with a major party and a major campaign to go after the other campaign in this country, you are not supposed to come anywhere near that. If that all took, now we don't know if it did, but there's a lot of evidence pointing in that direction. And read Byron York's piece today, or yesterday's piece, outlined a lot. There's read Kim Strassel's piece in the Journal. All those talk about this very thing. That's what's scary.
This dossier was marched over to the Justice Department by John McCain, was it not?
Clear back in the summer, they got
he marched it over there.
The final document, but they were getting, I think, read Byron's piece, they were getting parts of this throughout the summer, and they launched a counterintelligence investigation. We want to know those kind of things, and we're hopeful that Mr. Sessions will not only appoint a special counsel, but give us some answers on those things tomorrow.
Gates, I'll let you finish this off, but don't you think so many people watching this are like, everything is just partisan. The Republicans want to go after the Clintons, and the Clintons and Obamas want to go after Trump. The Democrats just want to take Trump out. They want to redo the election, and they want to show everybody that they were right. We never should have elected him. And then Republicans just want to go after the Clintons. And people who don't focus on the minutia of the dossier and Uranium One, How do Republicans proceed so you all don't look like it's just another witch hunt in reverse here?
Well, first thing we have to do is have an equal standard that is applied to both the president and Mrs. Clinton. There's a special counsel investigating the president. We need the same standard to apply to the Clintons. They've never had the same standard. It's time we do that now.
Great to see both of you. Thanks for joining us tonight. And directly ahead, Roy Moore is hit with new sexual misconduct allegations. So what should the Republican Party do to keep the Alabama Senate seat? And is it time to revisit the many allegations against Bill Clinton? One of his former accusers is here tonight with us. Developing news in the Alabama Senate race, a fifth woman is now coming forward to claim that Judge Roy Moore made unwanted sexual advances toward her when she was a teenager. We're now less than a month away from Alabama's special Senate election, where Judge Moore will appear as the Republican Party's candidate. The Republicans are certainly in a bind, and today Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called on Moore to step aside. The worst-case scenario for the GOP would be for the Democrats to take advantage of the turmoil and actually win the seat in deep red Alabama. And even if Moore wins, it's increasingly likely that the Senate will either refuse to seat him or expel him soon after he's sworn in. Today, the New York Times reported that the White House officials are actually considering scenarios where Attorney General Jeff Sessions would return to his old job in the Senate. Joining me now for a reaction to try to sort all this out is Harmeet Dillon, a Republican strategist and civil rights attorney, along with Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Harmeet, this Gloria Allred press conference today didn't really surprise me. I can't believe it took her this long to bring a accuser forward, but the facts didn't sound good. I mean, the facts sounded awful, and your reaction to them. A 16-year-old girl said he forcibly, assaulted her, basically threw her out of the car, or she fell out of the car, and he sped away in a parking lot. Where does this leave this?
Well, and she has documentary evidence, too. And the signature in the yearbook is certainly a very awkward thing for a 30-something-year-old man to be doing. So I think she's credible. And on top of his very weird statements to Hannity a couple of days ago.
Incriminating in many ways.
I think so. I think so. And so with those two things and the contradictions as a lawyer, I have to say that, while it's way past the statute of limitations to prove the case, in the court of public opinion and politics, I think he's toast.
Yeah, it's a political situation, not a legal situation. Byron, the Gloria Allred presser, does that affect the Alabama voters? The woman is a Trump supporter. She voted for Trump. She's not a Democrat activist. She didn't go to the Women's March. She's a Trump supporter. And again, this is decades ago. You can't prove it or disprove it. But, I thought that was not a good development, to say the least, for Roy Moore.
Well, the election's not until 4 weeks from tomorrow. So there is time for more stuff to come out. And if indeed these charges are true, it's very unlikely that it was done once and never again. So I think you're likely to see more. But the Republican Party is in a terrible mess here. I mean, first of all, Republicans are wary of trying a write-in vote because it's a special election.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't have the kind of turnout in a general election. The governor doesn't seem to want to change the election date because she's already done it once.
She can do it again, though.
She could do it again if she wants.
What would happen if she did that? Could you then reprint ballots? Is that possible or no?
Well, the law says the ballot is set 76 days before the election, so you push it out there, and you could change things, and you could get a different candidate on the ballot. But Roy Moore doesn't owe anybody anything. So now what you saw today was Republican members of the Senate upping the ante and saying we will expel him.
Cory Gardner, also of course McConnell, both. They're both establishment politicians. They didn't like Roy Moore from the beginning, but they can make his life miserable. And then in turn, 2018 Senate candidates, they're all going to get the Roy Moore question. Will that push Roy Moore to say, okay, well, I don't even want to be with you people, let alone, run this whole race out?
The Senate can expel a member, but he can make their life miserable. They can't just swear him in and then expel him. There will be due process involved. There will be hearings. There will be witnesses. There will be a long process, and it will be uglier by the day.
Harmeet, as a civil rights attorney, you've done a lot of work in cases supporting Trump supporters who have been attacked attacked, like physically attacked at events. And you also represented a lot of women who've been, subject to the various forms of abuse. Does this type of revelation years later, is that seem politically timed to you? I mean, he has been out there for 30 years in public life, 30 plus years in public life. It is kind of interesting that it all comes out a month before the election.
Well, obviously,
veracity or non-veracity of the women aside, the timing of this is quite stunning.
Well, both things can be true. That the timing is engineered by his political opponents, that seems almost certain to me. But it also can be true, and probably is, that these women have nothing to gain by coming forward at this time. I mean, it's humiliating. It's very traumatizing for them, and you can see the trauma in today's victim with Gloria Allred. And so,
yet there have been false accusations. We saw the Duke, lacrosse case. We saw the Rolling Stone case. And he wouldn't say, what do those women really have to gain?
But these women don't know each other,
Yeah.
and they're telling a consistent story. And even after the press conference, a story has come out about him being banned from local malls.
That was in the New Yorker. That the mall cops apparently didn't want him at the mall, the Gadsden Mall, and they can't confirm. Again, they tried to go back and confirm this through security officials at the mall, but they can't confirm it. So it's
a long time ago. But when you see the signature of
cruise in the mall for the kids is not a good.
And what 32-year-old is signing yearbooks? I mean, that's just creepy. So I don't know how to explain that.
Byron, as a matter of pure politics at this point, if he decides, okay, I'm done with this, I'm not part of this, I'm separating myself, I'm withdrawing, his name remains on the ballot.
It does.
And then if he still wins, which he could, probably won't, but if he wins, they then declare the election null and void. However, I learned over the weekend that they never passed rules governing the primary process and this process of this. They never passed the actual rules, which is kind of a dirty little secret in Alabama. So it's unclear what the final ruling would be on the null and void. Would it mean Doug Jones wins, or would it mean the entire election is thrown out?
Right, and it could mean the governor appointing another senator. And
Big Luther's back.
The original plan was for Luther Strange to serve in the Senate until November 2018, and there would be an election then for the last 2 years of Jeff Sessions' seat. But this current governor, Kay Ivey, wanted to do it sooner, so now there's going to be one on December 12th, and all this has.
We have Mo Brooks, who was actually kind of anti-Trump during the primary, but then he came around to Trump. Very strong on immigration, great conservative. We have Gary Palmer, who's a congressman in Alabama, kind of right down the middle, conservative. There are a lot of people in Alabama who could actually step forward. You also have Bob Riley, the former two-term governor, very popular of Alabama, who I bet you could convince to throw his hat into the ring on this. And he's very well thought of. We tried to reach Bob Riley tonight to see if he'd come on the show, and he doesn't want to talk right now. Everybody's kind of running for the hills, but those are three good options for the state.
But even if it's Roy Moore, you have to remember, I think, the Senate leadership, Republican leadership, may have to dial this back a little bit out of respect to the voters of Alabama.
Alabama has to decide.
If they elect this man, then the Senate is going to have to respect that.
Yeah, well, and the South doesn't like to be considered dumb, backwater, all the stereotypes that the North still puts on the South. They don't much like that. So they don't much like, whether it's television hosts or anyone else telling them what they should do in their home state. It's great to see both of you. Thank you so much. And with sexual harassment and assault scandals rocking some of the top names in Hollywood, media, now politics, even some on the left are turning their attention back to Bill Clinton, who's been dogged by sexual assault allegations for years. For example, today on the liberal Atlantic magazine's website, this is shocking, an article reads in part, quote, "Feminists saved the 42nd president of the United States in the 1990s. They were on the wrong side of history. Is it finally time to make things right?" Joining us now for a reaction from Arkansas is one of Bill Clinton's accusers, Juanita Broderick, who claims that Bill Clinton raped her. And she joins us now. Juanita, after all these years, even some on the left are coming around to this idea that you should be taken just as seriously for your allegation as someone represented by Gloria Allred.
Yes, I've been hearing that, Laura, and it's very rewarding.
Do you think, Juanita, after all these years and you see these accusers now coming forward on Roy Moore, that in a very odd way, your case, even though it was only Lisa Myers at NBC and a few short articles about your situation with Clinton, that we're actually advancing on this issue and this topic? Or is it still just all about politics in the end when it comes to politicians?
Well, I think in this situation we're actually advancing. I feel like people are starting to believe. I think people are starting to believe and realize that I was truly sexually assaulted by Bill Clinton.
And I think we're going to go, I think we lost, I can't hear Juanita, unfortunately, but Juanita, hold on, because I'm going to go back to my panel. We're going to fix the audio, and I'm going to go back. So her point is interesting, because she said, look, no one believed me. No one believed me all those years ago, and now, it looks like, because it's so obvious, the double standard when it comes to the left versus the right, that I think some on the left are now saying, maybe we should have given her a little more credence. Well, Lisa Myers did on NBC. It took a lot of guts for Lisa Myers to do that.
She did. This is an extraordinary development, and it's obviously coming out of all of the sexual harassment stories we're having right now, but it's also coming because the Clintons are receding into the past and their clout is gone. It is safe to look into something like this where it was not in 1998.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Donna Brazile has found it safe now to come out, and so people are now piling on and driving the multiple knives into the back of the Clintons, and this is one example of that. I think it's opportunistic.
But you think of Juanita Broderick. I'm so sad I couldn't hear her audio, but you think of her situation. She came forward after a very difficult period, and she basically got nothing from it. I mean, she got an NBC report, and I will always be grateful for Lisa Myers for actually pursuing that. And she didn't have any political axe to grind, but she came out and she told her story. And I remember even at the time, people were doing polygraphs and, polygraph analysis. She's probably telling the truth, just the way she told the story and told friends at the time what happened.
But Laura, I've had a few of my Republican friends say all of these 5 women accusing Judge Moore must be lying, et cetera. And the reason why women hesitate to come forward is exactly this Juanita Broderick situation. She gets dragged through the mud.
Right.
People don't believe you. It happened a long time ago. Why didn't you come forward at the time? It's common for victims to not come forward for years.
And I think what we need to do is also empower women.
Absolutely.
It's hard when you're a 16-year-old. No, when you're an adult woman in the workplace, we need to empower women so they can say at the time, you're a slob, you're a freak, you're a pig, I'm going to HR, I'm going to talk about this. But it's hard when there's a disparate power base in the workforce. You're a little peon and this guy's so it is hard for women. Byron.
With the Broderick case, you have to remember this fit into the way the Clinton machine was treating the women who were accusing the president of some sort of misconduct. I mean, some of the things that were said in that case would really stun people today. For example, when Paula Jones came out with her allegations against Bill Clinton, I believe James Carville, his top strategist, said, if you drag a $100 bill through a trailer park, no telling what you'll find. I mean, it's hard to imagine.
And bimbo eruptions. That's what was said about these ladies, bimbo eruptions.
And remember when Monica Lewinsky we first learned about that, before they knew she was going to kind of cooperate with them, the Clintons, they called her the Clutch, the nicknames, the Stalker. They were ready to destroy that woman's character. And all these years later, I actually feel really bad for Monica Lewinsky. I mean, this has been her whole life. She's 22 years old. She's branded, so I think Harmeet's point is well taken. I know a lot of people watching Fox tonight will say you're rushing to condemn Roy Moore. I'm not. I'm really not. I don't know. All these years later, as a lawyer, I can't say that everything everyone says is true on one side or another. But I will say, if a man uses his power over a man or a woman in the workplace and does something like this, they have no business in politics. And I don't care if it's a Democrat, a Republican, or someone who's not well known at all. And this has got to change. This whole situation has got to change. But the people of Alabama, Byron, this is their election. It's up to them. And Mitch McConnell can threaten all he wants, but the people of Alabama are going to do what the people of Alabama want to do.
And Mitch McConnell is going to have to adjust to it. You can't just throw somebody out of the Senate. You can't just refuse to let them enter into the Senate if they have been actually elected. And I mean, this is a situation where believe me, if Roy Moore is elected 4 weeks from tomorrow, the voters will know what's going on. This has been dominating Alabama politics.
Well, do we have Juanita Broderick back? Yes? Yes. Juanita, sorry about that. See, the gremlins were in the system. They still don't want you to talk, Juanita. Isn't that awful? I'm so sorry. This is live TV. This is what happens. Like, listen, on the radio, Juanita, on the radio when this happens, it doesn't matter. But on TV, it's like, whoa, thank God we have Byron and Harmeet here. Anyway, Juanita, I hope you were able... Go ahead.
I was enjoying listening.
Well, I hope you heard some of it. I hope you heard some of it, because I remember, and I would like, and if you don't mind speaking to Lisa Myers of NBC, because all those years ago, I was actually hosting a show on MSNBC, and I remember when she came forward with that report, and she had to fight to get that on the network. And I had to fight to be able to talk about it on MSNBC. Right. I got into a huge fight with MSNBC executives at the time because they didn't want me to run it on my show at the time. They didn't want me to go near you at the time, and I think you came on with me.
Yeah, well, don't you remember when Britt Hume and all of the men around him and women were wearing Free Lisa Myers buttons?
Oh,
I don't know if you remember that or not.
I do remember that.
That was really.
Yeah, but that's when we had reporters. Yeah, that's when we had reporters who were actually willing to go to the mat. Do you think, Juanita, after all this time, there will be any, whatever, there's not justice because, it's not a legal case, but there will be some type of comeuppance for the Clintons, or it's just a momentary thing here?
Oh, Laura, I hope so. I hope that they finally get what's due to them. That's why I was so enraged yesterday when Chelsea Handler tweeted what she did, and why I came back and tweeted what I did. She supported my abusers in the 2016 presidential race. And I wanted to say to her, I matter too. All victims matter. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, or if you're, who cares? Or if you're straight, or if you're gay, or if you believe in God or not. We all have the right to be believed.
And Juanita, we actually have a full screen, I think, of that tweet that Chelsea Handler, that totemic intellect. Imagine being molested by an older man. She said, then that man denies ever doing it and goes on and gets elected to the United States Senate. What kind of message does that send? And then you tweeted back at her, hello, remember me. Yeah. And again, a lot of these people have very short-term memories. I'm glad you took her on, Juanita. I apologize for our audio gremlins, but we'll have you back. Thank you so much for spending some time with us, and to Harmeet and Byron for picking up the slack in the studio. These are two good friends. And coming up, a shocking report revealing the number of people issued visas to the United States from countries, you guessed it, that are state sponsors of terror. Stay with us. Back on Halloween, an ISIS-inspired terrorist from Uzbekistan killed 8 people in New York City by driving through a crowd on a bike path. So how does somebody like that get into this country? It turns out it was through a thing called the Visa Lottery Program. And we're learning more about that program tonight. Data is now showing that the U.S. government issued nearly 30,000 visas to people from countries designated as state sponsors of terrorism between 2007 and 2016. Again, all through that lottery. This is not good. It doesn't take a genius to say that. And joining us now for reaction here in Washington is Michael Starr Hopkins, a Democratic strategist, and Mark Krikorian, executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies. It's a group that advocates for stricter controls on immigration. Gentlemen, it's great to see both of you. Thanks. Michael, what's going on here? I mean, we have a lot of problems in our country. We have a lot of problems with gang violence and some crime. Some crime has gone down, but we still have big struggle and drugs and so forth. Yeah. And now we're bringing in people on this lottery system. It's kind of like affirmative action for visas, I think, because it's like it's all diversity, we need diverse things. But it turns out we're bringing in a lot of people from countries where we really can't vet people very well. Are you in favor of that? Or?
Let me unpack all that. So first, immigrants have committed less crime than actual natural-born American citizens.
Fewer crimes.
Fewer crimes, and crimes at a lower rate than natural-born American citizens. So I think it's dangerous when we start painting broad strokes.
Why does that matter?
Immigrants. Because
do you think people have a constitutional right to come into this country?
No, but every immigrant who comes here under the diversity waiver, which is 4% of all visas that come into the United States, these people all go through an extensive background check. They all go through. They have to have, a high school diploma. Some have to have bachelor degrees. There's a very specific criteria that they have to meet. And so I think when we start painting people as criminals and things as such, gang members are American citizens. Timothy McVeigh, who killed hundreds of Americans, was an American citizen.
You're going back to the old Timothy McVeigh saw.
I mean, we can go back to Sutherland, Texas. I think if our issue is,
but we already have enough problems with that. I mean, we don't really need to.
I'm just saying, if we're making
take
sure
a flyer on other people.
If we're making sure that people aren't getting killed, then let's look at Americans before we're looking at people. So we should take
a chance on Sudan. Would you trust Sudan's background checks? I mean, if you were to go through Sudanese,
they have to go to the
Sudanese records. I mean, Sudanese record keeping? Are you kidding me?
But we don't have to rely on that. We have the State Department.
What are we finding out? We have to go through Sudan. We don't have a magic box we go to find some guy unless he's on a terrorist watch list.
But that's like saying, a Sudanese person goes through security when they fly through the Sudanese airport, but they go through our security before they enter. And the same's true with immigrants coming through on visa waivers.
Mark, is this a problem? I mean, they get to bring in not their whole family, but they get to bring in, once they come in, a spouse and adult children, children under the age of 21.
What it does, I mean, those are the people they bring with them once they win the lottery. But the long-term effect is what they call chain migration, because after 5 years, they can become citizens. Then they can bring their parents, they could bring their adult siblings, they could bring their adult sons and daughters then. And then those people have their own spouses, those spouses have their own relatives, and it goes on and on and on. And this, what the lottery does is start new migration chains. And our research shows that the average immigrant that you give a green card to results in at least 3 additional people who will follow him, not right away, but over the years.
What's the figures just from Mexico? I remember
from
just
Mexico,
on the chain migration.
it's even
that's
higher.
That's not
part of the lottery. But for Mexico, it's more than 6 immigrants per person who eventually come in because of our family immigration system. Because the way it works, our system is based on who you know, not on what you know. And that's beyond husbands, wives, and little kids. You marry somebody abroad, you adopt a baby abroad, you have the right to expect your fellow Americans to let you bring that person in. I'm all for that. But other than that,
adult brother, aunt, second cousin, twice removed.
These people do still all have to go through background checks, have to meet requirements for visas.
You get a leg up in the system, though. When you have an American citizen sponsoring you,
absolutely,
family, you have a leg up on everyone else. So you can actually go to the front of the line.
But you still have to go through the line.
But it's another question here, though. I think we have to also realize that there are lower-income Americans, middle-income Americans, who still do struggle to get good work. And I think when we say chain migration, bring people in who can bring something to the country, have a skill, be self-sustaining. And if they come in, I would say everyone who comes in has to either be self-sustaining, show that you can earn a living, and if you can't any longer earn a living, an American citizen must sponsor you, be in charge of you. So it's not, you don't become a ward of the state. That's a concern.
Technically that's the law now, but interestingly enough, remember Michael Bloomberg, mayor of New York, a couple of years ago at the end of his administration, he actually pursued that because sponsors who had signed sponsorship agreements for immigrants they brought in, those immigrants went on welfare. The Bloomberg administration said, wait a minute, they sent him a bill. And they said, you guys are on the hook for this. A lot of people paid. They collected several $1 million. And then the de Blasio administration came in and mailed the money back to those people.
Gotta love it.
The fact is, it doesn't work because it's not going to be enforced.
It does, though. It does work, though. I live in New York, and some of the greatest people in New York aren't people who are American-born.
This isn't about whether people are good or bad. Immigrants are no better or worse than anybody else.
Because we're talking about things like, are immigrants criminals? Are they contributing to society?
We're talking about public schools where a lot of fancy people in Washington don't send their kids.
I'm a product of Washington, D.C. public schools.
I'm a product of public schools, too, but in Northern Virginia now, in some schools, 17 languages are spoken.
But immigrants
How does a public school teacher How are they supposed to teach with 17 languages? Kids who come into the school illiterate in their own language, let alone can't speak the English
But that's
language.
not because
That's
of
a problem.
immigrants. That's because we're cutting the estate tax.
No,
those
no,
are very,
no, no.
those are very different issues.
It's not because of immigrants as people. There's no question about
No, we
that.
love
They're
immigrants.
No better
I love
or worse
immigrants.
than
for sure.
anybody else.
Immigrants are human beings. However, a country, and I think, Michael, you would agree, a country has a right to determine her own immigration laws and
Absolutely.
her own borders. And if immigration laws are either being violated or are not working for the American people for whom they're supposed to work, then I think they should be revisited.
But we've had comprehensive immigration reform on the table, bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform, and Republicans haven't passed it. They own the House.
So
the Senate,
Republicans
the White
who
House.
wanted amnesty and doubling legal immigration got together with Democrats who wanted
Yeah, that's a
amnesty and
collusion.
doubling legal. Yeah,
We
that's
figured out.
collusion. It's
Last
not
I checked, that's
bipartisan.
bipartisan. I mean, that's an agreement.
By the
Well,
way,
that's the
can I say something completely unrelated to this? That Michael looks exactly like a combination of Bruno Mars and Lenny Kravitz. And I said it before, and I said I'm going to say that on television.
Right?
Because,
It works well at bars.
And you said
It works well at bars.
You get confused for both of them. So
See?
But Laura's not saying who I look like a combination.
Kirk and
of, so-
You know.
you're good on TV and radio.
Adonis.
Okay, just
I
enough
think you got it.
of the compliments for both of you. Thank you so much. And straight ahead, President Trump argues for a better relationship with Russia, and the left and some on the right lose their mind. But do his critics have it all wrong? Maybe. Stay tuned.
How do you chase what
President Trump's critics have many things they love to complain about, but perhaps their favorite line of attack is to complain that he's too soft on Vladimir Putin and the Russians. Roll the tape.
He's taking some heat now for suggesting that he believed Vladimir Putin with regard to Putin not being involved in any meddling in the election. That doesn't sound like America first. It sounds like Russia first.
He continues to give Russia a pass. 2 years of essentially not seeing Russia as the international spoiler.
I regret to say this. The President of the United States is without a clue as to who we are and what this country represents.
Yeah, he just won the election. He doesn't know anything about the people. So why exactly are closer relations between the United States and Russia a bad idea? Joining us now for a reaction from L.A. is Roger Simon, the co-founder of PJ Media, and here in Washington, Mike Warren, a senior writer at the Weekly Standard. All right, Michael, let's start with you. This is the way I look at it. I lived in the former Soviet Union as a student, and I have 2 Russian sons who I adopted, and I'm fascinated by the Russian psyche. One thing about the Russians is their pride. They have a lot of pride in Russian history and everything they've been through. And so I bet Vladimir Putin, when you see him trying to talk to Trump when they were walking in the Philippines, he kept trying to talk to him. Trump's kind of doing small talk. But I think they, like China in many ways, they want to be shown some respect. Is it a bad thing for the United States not to try to engage with Russia where we can engage and actually maybe accomplish something?
Well, I don't think anybody's seriously saying that we shouldn't engage with Russia. It's a big country. It's got a lot of national resources. It's got that permanent veto power on the UN Security Council. That being said, I think it's important to be clear-eyed about not just Russia, but Vladimir Putin in particular, and his designs for his own, you mentioned pride. He also has designs to be a major power in some areas where the United States has its own interests. And a lot of times those interests conflict or really, actually come in contact with each other. Take the Middle East, for instance. That's a place where I think you go back to the Obama administration. They made a mistake, I think, in not getting involved.
How's that reset? They wanted to reset.
They wanted to reset, and what they ended up doing in, for instance, the Middle East is they didn't engage in Syria. They allowed the Russians, who again are allies with Iran and Bashar al-Assad, to really take control. Now they're in charge of that region where the United States is no longer a player.
Hey, Roger, when I think of all that I hear about Russia, we can't do this, we can't do that, I always say, okay, now apply that analysis to China. China is building islands in the South China Sea. China is stealing our intellectual property. China stole 50 million personnel background check files from the Office of Personnel Management. China is forever hacking into our systems. China has terrible human rights violations, and they have a 2025 plan to dominate most major industries. But we have no problem having constant dialogue with China and wanting to work with China, doing joint ventures with China. China is good, Russia bad.
Yeah, it's just pure prejudice. Also, China is more powerful than Russia.
Much more powerful by about threefold.
I would say that's a good estimate. But you know, the other interesting thing, and here's where I differ in nuance, I hate the word, but with Mike, is that I think that a lot of the Russia stuff that's been going on since the beginning of the election has sort of distorted things to such a degree that the public can't deal with Russia, and Trump has been undercut continually in the ability to try to deal with them, and just being called a softie. But who was more soft than Obama when he whispered to Medvedev that tell Putin that I'll be fine after the election? I mean, if Trump had done that, he'd be impeached and beheaded. I mean, it's ridiculous. But he didn't do anything like
follow up.
I think this is something that all American presidents fall into. They think, you know, remember George W. Bush said, "I can see into Putin's soul." The problem is that there's I think the president has a problem in not being able to acknowledge that Russia had tried to meddle in the election when everybody in the administration,
including Mike Pompeo at the CIA, who we
Yes.
kind of backed off on that. Both of you, we're going to have you back for a longer segment. This is really fascinating, and thank you for joining us. And up next, the mainstream media swooning over Ohio Governor John Kasich. Why? Tonight's angle after this. Governor who just won't go away. That's the topic for tonight's angle. John Kasich has been a headline of a Sunday show guest for now, 17 times since Trump's inauguration? And he used his latest Sunday show outing yesterday to convene a gun control talking group.
What I want to do is I want to get a group of reasonable people, pro-gun people, and those who favor limits on gun ownership, and I want to put them in a room and see if we can find some common ground.
Fascinating. And a month ago, he spent another Sunday morning trashing President Trump's trade and immigration policies.
The Republican Party cannot be anti-trade. The Republican Party can't be anti-immigrant.
Why does Kasich think his voice is wanted in the current political environment? Oh, yeah, he's still governor of Ohio, but he has zero constituency in the party, in the grassroots. And remember, he wouldn't even attend the Republican convention in his home state. I don't know if Kasich felt like he was just too humiliated to show his face in Cleveland. And don't you hate a sore loser? Even Detroit Mayor Coleman Young welcomed the GOP to the city of Detroit in 1980, and he was a Democrat. And though Kasich is a total washout nationally, let's face it, it's uncharitable to say, but he is. He's considering running in 2020 on something called a unity ticket with Democrat Governor John Hickenlooper of Colorado. That'll work. In his commentary, you can hear Kasich's simmering disdain for the party that so roundly rejected him. And his contempt for President Trump is now legendary. Perhaps, I was thinking back on this, I think it's one debate moment, perhaps from October of 2015, that really stuck in his craw. Let's watch.
This is the man that was a managing general partner at Lehman Brothers when it went down the tubes and almost took every one of us with us, including Ben and myself, because I was there and I watched what happened.
That stung. And though he's long denied his personal bitterness had anything to do with this grudge against Trump, I don't just believe it at this point. John Kasich can go on all the Sunday shows he likes, and reporters will continue to celebrate him as the uber coolest never-Trumper of them all. But after all the bluster and the photo shoots and the camera time and the green room time, John Kasich is where he was at the end of the primary season. He's a man with enormous ambition and just minimal support, just a little bit. We may not know where Kasich is headed, but boy, do we know where he came from. Do you remember what his father did?
Well, let's start off with my father being a mailman. Well, Megan, my father was a mailman, and my father was the mailman. They called him John the Mailman, like my dad, the mailman, John the Mailman. And I got to tell you, my father carried mail on his back.
I like mailmen. And speaking of mail, this will soon be landing in the mailboxes of unfortunate GQ subscribers everywhere. In their Man of the Year edition, Gentleman's Quarterly has named Colin Kaepernick Citizen of the Year. The man who started the NFL kneeling epidemic during the national anthem, the man who inspired his fellow players to break faith with their audience, the man who's responsible for the league losing millions in merchandising and tickets and viewers, is being hailed by a men's fashion magazine as an exemplary citizen. If you're looking for exemplary citizens, I have a few. How about Stephen Williford, the Texas man who confronted and pursued that church shooter in Sutherland Springs? Or how about Houston Texans star J.J. Watt? He raised $37 million for Hurricane Harvey victims. And by the way, GQ also named Stephen Colbert the bad hombre of the year. Well, I suppose if you hate President Trump, stage protests and complain, well, you're instantly something of the year at GQ. The good news is Kaepernick and Colbert made our year-end cut as well. Not sure if they're going to be celebrating this honor, though. And that's the angle. That's all the time we have tonight. Shannon Bream and the Fox News at Night team is up next.